And we're live. Welcome.
Hello.
Welcome to a special edition, Monday edition, 3 o'clock, where we're just talking about concept art to answer a few questions that we've had in regards to that topic. But what we're really excited about is we have a special guest, Lorin Wood, concept artist, general artist, and teacher, designer, all of those things. Rolled up into one. There he is, Lorin Wood. So, what I'd like to do right now is turn it over to Todd for just a bit, and he can start us off with some of the questions that maybe he's had, and what we would also love. Sorry to not really turn it over to Todd, but but what we would love is your questions. If you're here, let us know that you're here in the chat, and we will see what we can answer, and we can see what Lorin can answer. So, without further ado, go for it, Todd.
All right. So what we want to do today is we've been getting a lot of questions in terms of conceptual artwork, and what it means to be a concept designer. And a lot of this comes from the students that we have here in the ATech program at UT Dallas. But just in general, how do you get into that mode of production, or that place in production as a professional? And what we thought we'd do today is just take this hour to kind of go through and break down a little bit of the kind of the ins and outs of what concept art really is and who's really doing these things and the types of maybe work that they're doing prior to becoming these artists, just to help give everyone a little bit of a guide or a benchmark in terms of what they could be shooting for, the things that they should be working on now if that's their end goal. And to that end, which is why I'm glad we have Lorin here with us today, I think Lorin, one of the major questions that we get is that we have a student, let's say, who says, I'm really into conceptual artwork. I think the upfront work is amazing in terms of, you get the story and we're designing something specific to a story. But where do I start, right? How do I get a beginning or a foot in? It's like, what do I need in terms of, obviously, when you go online, you can look at people's portfolios and you start to look around. You see some amazing artwork and whatnot that's there. But there's not really a school for concept art, so to speak. So do you want to talk just a little bit about kind of what concept art is, first and foremost, and then kind of how there's different approaches or different kind of entry points into the world of conceptual artwork?
Yeah, and yeah, thanks for having me on here, guys. So yeah, that's a really good question, because that's kind of the foundation for a lot of artists to get into this field. But the first thing I want to call out for, the most important, crucial aspect is being a conceptual artist is highly competitive. So you need to be drawing. You need to have that muscle memory built up, which means, when I tell my students, I teach online classes, is you have to be drawing all the time. It can't be a hobby. It's not a 9-to-5 thing. This is like kind of part of your identity. And so, because that comes through into your work, you're observing things, you're observing the world, you're doing studies, you're doing sketches, you're coming up with fantastic stories, whatever. But first and foremost, you need to draw. You need to have a basic understanding of fundamentals. You need to have an understanding of perspective, of composition. You need to understand how to render textures, basic stuff. And this will all just be done simply with a pencil and paper. But first and foremost, it's just literally just doing the exercise of drawing. So that would be the first and foremost thing. So it doesn't matter where you are, always have a sketchbook with you. And I say sketchbook, not tablet, not iPhone, whatever. Those are all fine. There's too many shortcuts, though. Basically, what you need to do is learn to work with traditional media, because there will be opportunities and times where you'll get into a production, the power will go out, you'll be called out to a location where there is no electricity. You
Giant ice storm?
During an ice storm, for example. Yeah, exactly. Guess what's going to happen? You're only going to have what tools are available to you, and having the ability to just simply draw with your hands, on traditional media, that's going to go that's going to go a long way, because there's so many artists these days that don't do that. They rely strictly on digital tools, and that's not really good. I mean, a lot of professional guys, and I'm going to name drop here, but Doug Chang, who's the head of everything Star Wars at Lucasfilm, he looks at sketchbooks. He doesn't look at tradition. He doesn't look at digital fine-tuned paintings. He doesn't look at 3D artwork. First and foremost, he wants to see the sketchbook. He wants to see the thought process. He wants to know what's going on in your head, and he wants to see your mistakes. He wants to see the progress of your drawing. So first and foremost, that's kind of the foundation. But yeah, to break into concept art, you have to start off in a basic field, because concept art is a specialty. It's like the icing on the cake. It's something that you do once you have a good foundation of something else. So basically, concept art came about from a bunch of industrial designers. They essentially created the whole idea of concept art. So we go back to Joe Johnston, Sid Mead, we've got Ralph McQuarrie, kind of these stalwarts who are like the godfathers, grandfathers of the entertainment design industry. They all came back from engineering, came from product design, illustration, and so you'll go into a school, in UTD, for example, you learn the foundations. There's plenty of art books. There's art of books, for movies. There's ArtStation. There's endless. And it's insane amount of reference that you can look at to pursue concept art and entertainment design. But you have to have the foundations. Every one of these fundamental, not exercise, but the disciplines basically create a foundation that can be applicable to our entertainment design. Entertainment design is kind of a free-for-all, because it pulls from basic things, again, like perspective, understanding composition. Entertainment design, if you go into film in particular, you have to understand the language of film, which means studying films, understanding cinematography, understanding visual effects, that kind of opens up a whole other thing, but that's all applicable. So I'm in the Visual Effects Society, and the former chair, I think he's one of the founders of it, Jeffrey Oken, asked me to join one of the board of directors to represent conceptual designers, because conceptual design is actually playing a bigger part now. As you're bringing in Unreal Engine, you're bringing all these other tools. Everything is kind of like seamlessly blended together, but the foundation is design. Having a good fundamental understanding of basic principles, that have been around for a century or so.
Yep. Well, I think that's an interesting point too. Is that it's not, the drawing is kind of one of the ways that you have to think about things in drawing, but it's also on the design side. It's not just about the drawing. It's about understanding what you're trying to do with these things, and that's where I think it's about observation, and it's about being able to read a script or read a story and take a synopsis of something and distill it down into, what am I trying to show with this? Because at the end of the day, you're trying to take someone, in conceptual design anyways, you're trying to take somebody else's ideas and present them in a tangible way, and basically show them what they may have in their head, especially if it's a director or somebody who isn't, who can't kind of create those images on their own, but they know what they want. So you're trying to distill all that down and then present something that works for the story. It has to be, appealing, or it has whatever it has to do to fit inside those shows. And I remember back in the day when they were looking for what ILM would post all of their posts in terms of like their design positions. It all says like industrial design, product design. It says like something, and again, going back to like Sid Mead. And I think, understanding that too, from a perspective of a student, let's say, you need to kind of know what came before and kind of how things have evolved to see where it's going. And I think you hit on kind of where things are now with the amount of pre-visualization that goes into a film, which is essentially now it's kind of in the mix of design and animation and it's kind of everything coming together, or doing maquettes instead of just doing sketches now. But again, it's all based on the artist maybe sketching it all out ahead of time and then doing their maquettes, or doing kind of but I think the fundamental stuff never seems to really change or go away. It's just the applications of.
Yeah, I mean, you're getting new, more sophisticated tools that make the process easier, and also permit whoever's in charge more creative freedom to develop more elaborate stuff. But at the end of the day, for example, I'll give it. Here's an example of it's I was working at Gearbox Software. I got hired to work on Aliens Colonial Marines back in 2007, and we had we had a crash. Basically, we lost essentially everything, and there was like we lost the server, we lost electricity, so basically a video game company can't produce anything. Well, guess who was the only productive person in the whole studio that day? It's like, I was the only one with a literal drawing board with a pad of paper. And that was fun because I got to look really smug over at my art director, who lived and died by his Cintiq, which is like a paperweight at that point. So that's an example of the reality of things. But the thing is, they also relied on me, and this goes for all conceptual art, doesn't matter where what branch of the entertainment industry you're in, is they always go back to the designers and to the artists to lay the foundation. You have to have understanding of those principles, but the thing is, you're also helping develop the story with the filmmaker,
right?
And you're helping keep everyone else excited about the overall scope of this project all the way down the line until it's completed.
Well, I think Sean has a question.
We do. We have a
from the
question.
audience.
All right.
Yes, from I think it's Janae. Janae Draws. If I mispronounce that, or it could just be Jen. And I was actually about to ask this, so I'll word it this way. So you mentioned sketchbooks and having sketchbooks and always drawing in those sketchbooks, which I think is something that you hear a lot, and you hear it a lot because it's true. But my question would be, for somebody who's starting out or wants to get into this, what should they be drawing? So should we be looking at characters? Should we be looking at like actual character design or anatomy, environments, clothing, prop design, all that stuff? Or should it be landscapes and like world building and that stuff? I have an idea of my own, but I'd like to get, Lorin, I'd like to get your opinion.
Well, that's a really good question. The answer is really simple. It's what are you interested in? Are you somebody that loves Pixar movies? Are you somebody that loves Star Wars? Are you somebody that loves, do you love, do you watch a movie simply just look at the background matte paintings? It's very simple to, that's like the baby step. So you as an artist, figure out where your primary interest is, and you'll know what it is. And it's usually you'll be drawn to something continuously over and over again. It'll be a TV show, it'll be a movie, it'll be a comic book, it will be whatever. But there will be something consistent in that thing. You should identify that as your primary interest. And that can change, as you get older, as you grow, as your talent, develops, your taste is going to change. You're going to get more and more interested in other things. But yeah, starting off, what is your main interest? It's kind of like asking, what's your favorite food?
Sure.
What's your go-to food? That think of, take that and put that as your interest. So I love pizza. Great. I love Star Wars because Star Wars stories were based on a piece of pizza. So it's
So one of the things that we see, so Sean and I both teach a class here in ATech at UT Dallas called Visual Story 1. And what we've done over the past year is we've just started implementing like basics of perspective, because we found that students weren't gaining a lot of this knowledge in high school or in the drawing classes that they were taking within the university. So it's very much an introduction to 1 point, 2 point perspective, 3 point perspective, but it deals more heavily not just making cubes, but applications where we'll give them kind of real objects and say we need to apply something like this. And I think what we've seen is that sometimes there's a disconnect between doing kind of exercises like that, like creating cubes or creating pyramids, because it's pretty simplistic, right? But then you go to try to apply it to something more complex, and there's this, oh no, kind of, how do you connect the dots between, I know how to do it over here, but now this shape is different, and it's way more complicated. So do you recommend starting off with simplicity like that and trying to build up, even if they know their direction? Let's say they know the flavor of kind of what they want to shoot for. I'm just wondering, like, in terms of like exercises and warm-ups, like, again, Sean and I have some ideas in terms of like, you should be doing, at least this many pages of just this. If you're just starting off, you need to be doing these things. And then, but what would you say in terms of like graduating from like milestones, or what might those milestones be?
Well, first and foremost, yeah, my training as an industrial designer and this I've just kind of implemented this in my professional career over the last 20 years, is you always start off with the very, very basics. So you reduce things down, and this helps you understand primarily the overall form of the thing that you're designing, whatever it is. So for example, I'm thinking of a spaceship. So the primary spaceship is going to start off as a cube, and I think of this as like using SketchUp or carving like a piece of soap. You're basically just going to start slicing and carving out of that basic fundamental, primary shape. And then you start merging other primary shapes into that. And you're constantly massaging it. When you get comfortable, after doing that for a couple decades, then you can just go straight into a really complex design. But starting out, the critical, it's critical thinking. What you want to do is you want to really think about the 3 dimensions of this thing that you're designing. So start off with basic shapes: spheres, cubes, cylinders. Exercise I give to my students when they need it, on occasion, is I have them look up a manufacturer that produces real world robotics, and then what I have them do is I have them create their own unique new design, sticking with that form language, sticking with the shapes that are identified with that thing. And usually that process goes with them looking at one of these super complex things like Boston Dynamics, and then reducing that down to really simplistic geometry, really simplistic shapes. And then kind of reverse engineering that. And that helps them understand not only thinking in 3 dimensions, but you're throwing in a whole bunch of other principles. I mean, they're understanding how perspective affects the shape of a curve at a certain angle, a certain viewing angle. This is using 3D is like the shortcut, because the software basically takes care of all the complex thinking for you. This is a critical way of doing of coming up with a design that's not only relatively original, but it's really unique, and it helps out beyond just doing entertainment. When you understand fundamentals of good design, starting with primitives, that can be applied across anything. So it's not just spaceships, but you can utilize that doing landscapes. You can utilize that using creating characters. You can, not even entertainment. You can use those principles elsewhere. In various other industries.
Nice.
I don't know. Did that answer the question?
No, I totally answered the question. Do we have anything else from the live audience, Sean?
Oh, absolutely. Lorin, Sydney is asking, in your experience from Art Center, or really just experience, if a student could only take 3 classes, or I'm assuming these are just, hold on, sorry, she's just chatting here. 3 subject matters in terms of classes, what would you recommend? Like 3 essential classes.
Okay, so 3 is so I'm assuming this is like going into entertainment.
Yeah, so I know Sydney's in my Visual Story 1 class right now.
Okay.
So she's learning perspective, and I'll go ahead and shout her out. She's awesome.
Okay. yeah. I'd like to see her stuff.
Yeah.
So 3 basic classes. One would be storytelling. So she's already in the right place for that.
Okay.
Fundamentals of design would be another one. I don't know if that's not really a class, but you can find fundamentals of design. And then it would be like photography, because these things would kind of they all kind of there's like a synthesis between all of them. They all overlap, and especially in entertainment. Obviously you're going to be looking through a particular lens, through an aspect ratio for most of the time. Even in VR, you're going to be still looking through a relative amorphous aspect ratio. So understanding basic principles of how light interacts, creating atmosphere. I mean, which kind of leads to the storytelling, which the foundation of all that is just good design. so that's kind of like the holy trinity of entertainment design is understanding of photography, storytelling, and design principles.
Okay.
Can I throw in? I have a shameless plug here for Lorin's book. Just to show an example of the type of work that Lorin does.
Oh, Lauren's going to get his own books.
Oh man, his book's gonna be better than this one.
Oh no. Well, it is, but it's not mine. No.
you're good.
Plug away my book. Plug away my book.
Okay. Whoosh. Was it designs from spaceships from the couch? But this stuff reminds me a ton of like the stuff that I was seeing from like the episode 1 concept design book and stuff where it's like, this is all marker, right, with pen. Awesome perspective stuff happening. The question I have for you on some of this stuff is how do you go about, I think everyone's first inclination is to make super, super detailed stuff. But to me, the best concept art isn't necessarily super detailed across the board. There may be moments of complexity, but that's also, some of it's left a little bit ambiguous, a little bit amorphous, just so you can kind of imprint on it. So how do you know where to draw that line, so to speak?
Well, that kind of evolves. You know, as a designer, I'm still evolving. I'm still adopting new techniques and practices and things like that. I'm constantly building on what I learned before. You know, so my heroes were the original trilogy Star Wars designers: Joe Johnston, Nyla Rhodes Jamero, and Ralph McQuarrie. And then Sid Mead was on the outer rim of that. Kind of sprinkling me with his magic dust. Because he's kind of like beyond all of them, but through various through networking and various friendships I've developed. I'm friends with Doug Chang and George Hall and Ty Ruben Ellenson, and these are the guys who kind of came along, kind of like the golden age of Industrial Light and Magic art department. And Doug Chang has worked longer on Star Wars than anyone else alive, and so the fact that you brought up the episode 1 is that particular art book inspired so many people. Probably because of Doug's work. And so, chatting with Doug, the one thing I learned also is he's not precious with any of his stuff. So in my class, I had a visitor, another friend, a guy named Landis Fields, and he works with Doug Chang on the Mandalorian series. And so Landis is a 3D modeler, but what his job is, Doug comes up with the concepts, works with the art department, the artists, the conceptual artists. And then Landis takes that information and creates the virtual landscapes, which they use to project inside of the the LED volume where they actually shoot the series. And he said he came into the ILM art department one morning. It was like 6 a.m. or something ridiculous, and Doug had been there for like 2 hours already. And he had like his little entourage of helpers, and he had just stacks of conceptual art. And this actually kind of can go back to your previous question, Sean. But he said he basically had on the entire floor covering all of the conceptual art for just one episode. So hundreds of illustrations just for one episode of The Mandalorian. And Doug was sitting there kind of directing them to move this here, move this here. This is a different plot point, so let's move this over here. And so he's creating a visual story, through the conceptual art. And the one thing that Landis, that was surprising to him, he worked with Doug for many years directly, and he said that Doug he's not precious with any of his work. So you look at all the work in the episode 1 sketchbooks, art books, is he's ripping through like 20 illustrations in an hour, pen and marker illustrations, and they're simplistic because he's literally just going for that broad form. Doug calls it the 3-second rule. He learned that from George Lucas. It's in filmmaking, when you're designing something, you don't want your design to become the focus. The focus of the audience is to be on the story. And so you give the audience 3 seconds to look at, identify, and understand a piece of technology, and then they have to dismiss it because you don't want them to be focused on that. So case in point, Joe Johnston, when they created the TIE fighters, they created the Star Destroyers, the X-Wings. I mean, they're shaped like an X. They're shaped like a bow tie. The Star Destroyer is a piece of pizza. I mean, it's the most simplistic, basic shapes. And instantaneously, that creates a design language. So the good guys from the bad guys.
Yeah.
Same thing in Lord of the Rings. The good guys from the bad guys in that one. Very, very distinctly. And so Doug, when he designs, he's going strictly for the big forms. So when you look at his tutorials, when you look at his art books, he draws with a big fat pen, and he just fills in basic shapes. He's just going for the negative spots, and then the details come in only if they're necessary. So he keeps things nice and rough, but he's not precious. He'll just throw that stuff out, if he has to. If a better idea comes along. So, that's that's kind of a key ingredient. I think a lot of artists, myself included, we still don't understand yet, because a lot of us, I'm not going to run out of ideas anytime soon. So I don't care, if people steal my ideas or whatever. I'll have a better one. But the thing is, like, I still get caught up where I'll take way too long, even on a cruddy little, pen and ink sketch.
Yeah.
And I look at, and I reflect, on Landis, what Landis told our, my students is, don't be precious with it. It's not the end all be all, of design. So just keep the energy flowing. Keep it exciting. Keep the sketch exciting, and that's another aspect of it is you don't fill in all the details. When you keep it loose and rough, it creates a sense of motion and excitement.
Right.
If somebody looks at it.
All right, we got a few more questions.
Okay. Yeah.
So Israel asks, can you or do you involve 3D modeling into your concept art? Maybe like an environment for your final rendering. So I'm gonna jump in before Todd and Lorin answer this, and I will say, from my point of view, you do whatever you need to do to get your image done. Whatever helps you. And if creating something, primitive shapes in 3D, I know that's a really popular thing right now, jumping in Blender and stacking whatever you need to help with perspective or whatever relationships, size relationships, scale. I would come from it from the viewpoint of whatever helps you get to that image, then you do it. And with that, I'll turn it over to the others.
Well, I remember, so I worked with a guy when I was at DNA. We were working on the Ant Bully film, and I'm trying to remember what the art director's name was. But they did these amazing pen and ink sketches, but everything was very flat. So translating that to 3D was really hard. So we actually did some things where we would take their flat 2D sketches and I would mock up really crude geometry, and I would project their sketches onto the geometry, and then I would go in and kind of rework their layout to make it work for a camera. So like, I think to what Sean said, I think there's any number of ways where 3D, and 3D is awesome too if something is really complicated, if it's spiraling or if it's a big thing and you can't get the perspective just right. Sometimes I'll mock it up in 3D so I know kind of where it is, and then I'll kind of use that as an underlay or something like that to kind of draw over just to make sure certain elements of it are right. But do you have any thoughts, Lorin?
Yeah, it also depends where you are. Like if you're in a studio setting, you're going to have ideas like crazy. And again, it kind of goes back to, you can't be precious with it. You have to kind of get a bunch of ideas out because they need variations. So yeah, use whatever tool, as Sean says, that helps kind of get the process moving. When you're doing your own stuff, then, take your time, learn to understand perspective. That helps out a great deal. But yeah, in a work setting where they need results quickly, like you can't take time to take the ruler out and meticulously point out, draw various horizontal lines, blah blah blah. You need something that can work quickly, and I've done that also. I did that a lot at Gearbox. And from what I understand, what Todd mentioned is that's a very typical process. A lot of concept art these days, there's actually kind of a division now in the industry where they have CG conceptual artists, and so like my friend David Levy kind of specializes in that area. And then you have kind of the more traditional guys, John Parks and Ryan Church and those characters. There's a lot of 3D software being implemented into it. But that's primarily just to give variation. So if a filmmaker wants to look at something from a different angle, you can do that instantaneously without meticulously drawing a different angle. But they don't UV, they don't do anything like that. They basically just do what Todd did. They take the geometry and then just slap some rough textures or even the sketch on top of that and just kind of run with it.
Well, I think too, like this was a long time ago. I think it was at least maybe 10 or 20 years ago. They did a tour of the original Ralph McQuarrie and Star Wars artwork that was going around to some of the museums nationally, and I happened to catch it in Toledo. And the best stuff was on notebook paper and on napkins. And I think, Sean and I talk about, and I think some of our classes, there's like drawings for other people and there's drawings for you and there's shorthand. And I think, to me anyways, one of the misconceptions about concept art is that everything is finished and beautiful. Whereas when you're in a production, it only has to be whatever it has to be to communicate. So while you may start off with some really great looking stuff, as soon as there's a problem, it turns into like quick sketches, and it may be chicken scratch, it may be on a napkin, it may be on something else. It's like, no, 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 do this to it and fix it. And that then becomes the new blueprint for moving forward. Because that's the reality of production to me, is that it has to be so fast. So you don't always have time to go, and build out a 3D shape or to make a nice finished rendering. It just has to be done to move along to the next component.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. It's all about time, because time is money when you're on a production. So you have to be fluid, and you have to be quick.
All right.
What else do we have, Sean?
Yeah, from Sydney, she wants to know, Lorin, how long did it take for you to start feeling confident in combining your technical drawing skills and your design skills? And it's a two-parter. Has it always been easy for you, or was there a time where you felt like you were lacking in any of that?
Good question. Basically, I think this kind of applies to all artists. All artists are insecure. So you will never ever in your career or your life as an artist feel that you've peaked. If you have, there's something wrong with you, and you're incredibly arrogant. But the thing is, the fact of the matter is, you're always going to be insecure, and what your job is to do is to take that insecurity and find a way to, improve on that. Whatever you're insecure over. So for me, I mean, I started drawing when I was a kid. My dad was a product designer, and I started learning by copying his portfolio. Because there's something interesting about the technical method of product design. Drawing helicopters and coffee mugs. I mean, it was really simple. But there's a lot of self-education that goes along with it. You have to be proactive. You're not going to be a concept artist just out of the blue. You have to do a lot of footwork, and so it took me about 10 years to kind of get where I felt comfortable. With my own voice. It took me a while to basically figure out, okay, this is the Lorin Wood style. The Joe Joss has a style, Sid Mead has a very recognizable style, Ralph McQuarrie has a very recognizable style. All these well-known artists have very identifiable styles. And so that kind of, it's basically trial and error. There's no real easy answer. You just have to keep at it. You have to keep pushing yourself, and you have to keep researching. You have to be very curious. So if there's a different style that you like, pursue that. Part of this, part of the value of networking is getting to know these getting to know these other contemporaries. Becoming friends with them, and what that does is you get to pick their brains. You get to watch them. You get to watch over their shoulders and how they draw and they design. And the guys that I've become friends with, their backgrounds are so diverse, it's crazy. And there's some stuff that I like, there's some stuff that I really don't like, and so I kind of pick and choose what I like, and I experiment. So there's a lot of experimentation that goes on, when I'm not working on a project, and I just try to kind of push myself to find out, where my boundaries are. Does this help me better as a designer? Does this help me better as an artist? And so I just kind of try new things all the time. It's kind of a perpetual. You're basically kind of a perpetual student. Just constantly keep learning. And so with that, let me throw this up here. This and the How to Render books by Design Studio Press by Scott Robertson. He started the entertainment design track that I'm teaching at Art Center, and these are they're actually like legitimate textbooks. But he basically killed himself, literally showing, coming up, combining everything about design that he's learned over his elaborate career into 2 books, kind of simplifying it. But this is great because it's very technical. It shows you, loose hand, shows you how to draw freehand. It shows you how to draw very technical industrial design. And he focuses on engineering. He focuses on rendering, styles with, analog media, with digital media. But it's definitely something I would go for. I would have on your bookshelf, as a point of reference. And I look at it all the time. Even when I'm working on professional stuff, I find myself getting stuck doing a drawing in a particular style, or doing a storyboard a particular way. And I go, I always just say, like, all right, this is boring. I'm kind of getting I'm getting bored with this. So, I'll crack open his book, or I'll look at some of my other art books, and I'll go, I'm gonna try that out. And I kind of force myself to do a different rendering style or different drawing style. And it's all about growth. But embrace the insecurity. Don't ever feel like you are the best at what you're doing. Always reach out and always try to grab on and learn from other people.
Who was the author on that?
Scott Robertson.
Scott Robertson, that's right.
Yeah.
So I had hopped up when I got off camera. I thought that was the book that you were getting, and I have it over in my corner, but I can't. It's in a stack, and I can't pull it out. But it's a great book. It is technical though, I will say. Which actually somebody, where are we? Ansel, I think that's who asked, if I'm pronouncing that right. I had asked, what books do you recommend for fundamentals, and I figured you were going to say that one. So do you have any other ones? I have some stuff.
For fundamentals, I can pop up a list. I'll give you a list. You can post that in the chat later.
Sure.
Of like actual design books that cover just really basic fundamentals of design. Drawing shapes, of doing freehand. One of the for the most part, I have a whole menagerie.
Yeah.
Of books. There's the fundamentals is just the fundamentals. Like, can you draw a cone? Like, do you know how to render a cone? From a particular a directional light. I'll give you the list of the actual design books. They're really helpful. It's a good point of reference. They're also kind of the top in the design field.
Okay.
Design illustration field.
So one thing that I will recommend, and it is a little bit more specific to character design. I've got a lot of books. Like, I got stacks and stacks and stacks of books in here. But some of my favorite, and they're not necessarily even books, are hold on, let me see. The Character Design Quarterly. I love them, and they have what I love about them is they have real basic tutorials of like process walkthrough, and some of it is just artist work. So you're getting both. You're getting a little bit of tutorial, and this is how this artist would approach designing a character or whatever else. But also it's just giving you, it's introducing you to different artists that you might not have heard of, and so that's why I like it. Plus, they're only like $15, and so you can grab them. I really enjoy them. Those are some of the ones that I like to go back to the most. But again, those are specific to character design, so maybe not necessarily design fundamentals.
Well, I would throw the Noble approach out there too.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Because that talks not just about it's not just about the designs themselves, it's about his approach to like everything and how he would take real life and skew it and simplify it and create interesting shapes out of that. So I think that's an awesome one too.
Yeah.
Who's that?
Maurice Noble. He did a lot of the backgrounds for like Looney Tunes and with Chuck Jones and Tex Avery and
there's a couple other books of like Rob Ruppel. He has a couple of books that Satsuya Press published where he basically just shows these wonderful step-by-steps of his just like landscape studies.
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah, I've got that in my stack somewhere in here. It's awesome. It's an awesome book.
A stack of books holding things up right now.
Yeah, I can't because it's holding my camera up right now, so I can't get at that stack. And then I've got one over here that's holding my computer up. So
that's what I thought. Okay.
The screen looks, my room looks tidy right now, but if I move the camera anywhere, you'll just see stacks of trash and stuff. So,
our production budget is huge.
All right, let me see. We did have a question about portfolios. Let's see, make sure. Yeah, I think that's the only one we missed. So, does a concept artist need to have examples of everything you can do, or should you only be including what you're best at?
Want to answer that, Todd?
Go ahead, man.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'll throw it. I'm interested to hear what you have to say.
So the question was what again, Sean? Like, what should only put your best work into it?
examples of everything that you can do, or only the thing that you're best at?
So to me, I think it's okay to have a portfolio that has a lot of your everything in it. But when you're applying for something specific, I think you want to be selective about what you're kind of applying with. So you're kind of focusing things a little bit and then maybe giving a little bit of additional with it. So for instance, if I was applying to Pixar, Pixar still wants to see things like photography and wants to see things like still life drawing and everything else. But you also want to show them something a little bit different than what they see on an everyday basis. Show them why you're unique. Show them a little bit of your style. Don't just try to draw Buzz Lightyear. But having some of that in there, obviously, some caricature studies, some expression studies, things like that. But I mean, in portfolios, I like to see process. I like to see finished pieces and at least some process for how you got there. And it might be kind of the little rough sketches that kind of led up to it, but somehow show how you thought about the problem. That would be my answer.
Yeah, that's pretty much. I think that's pretty much universal. Also, is if you are applying to a particular studio, then yeah, you want to cater your portfolio. You want to filter it down to something that's relevant to that studio. And I would even add create a few pieces, kind of suck up pieces, that would be very appealing to that studio. Something that they're very interested in. Hopefully, you like that what the studio is doing. That your portfolio is already going to look like that. I mean, it's like, no, don't work at a place you don't want to work at. So that's kind of the bottom line there. But yeah, no, having if you're really good at a particular thing, have that be predominant. But show a little bit of a spectrum. So you may be good at characters, but show a little bit of something else that you're pretty good at. But it also, you're going to want to rearrange it. You want to arrange the portfolio, not necessarily from the weakest to the strongest. You don't want to go from the strongest absolute and then kind of trail off. You want to have this thing kind of like balanced out.
Well, I think just to add to that too, I think, and Sean, we kind of talk about this a little bit in some of the classes and whatnot, but it's also about understanding where that studio's kind of design philosophy comes from. Because if you apply to something and they do like your work, they're going to start asking questions, and you want to have background in terms of like, oh, well, I think this designer influenced or this type of painting, or this artist or something else. Because in a lot of times, if there's nothing there more than surface level, like I just make really pretty glossy stuff, again, it's missing the underpinnings that I think people are looking for. And then it also spurs conversation in terms of, oh, I like that artist too, or have you heard about this person? Oh, I haven't, but you know what I mean? But I think more than just kind of making things up and you want to know who you're applying to, kind of what those influences are. In the case of like ILM, you'd want to know who Ralph McQuarrie is. If you go in there and don't, you're not going to get the gig. Yeah. Right. So. Yeah.
That's sacrilege.
Yeah. I mean, that's just what it is.
No, I think that's great. I think that's everything we've got. Oh no, sorry. Sydney is asking, Lorin, will you ever teach a class here in the DFW area? I said he's in the DFW area. So
yeah, I currently live here. Well, funny enough, I'm actually going to be going into the master's program there at UTD at ATEC. Beyond that, we'll see what happens.
You'll just have to wait and see, Sydney.
I'm sure we'll find all kinds of creative ways to do fun things, Lorin.
All right. So those are all the questions that we've got so far in the chat. So let's see. Todd, you got anything? Are there anybody else in the chat have any questions?
I was going to give them an opportunity. If not, we can just talk. I have a couple other things that we can talk about with Lorin.
Okay, sure.
So going back to kind of the artwork itself, how much do you do in terms of different media? So if you're going to do a full-on, let's say you were going to do a full-on painting of something, right? Are you still going to start off with your kind of pen and ink, and then maybe some marker? So how do you progress? Even if you know this is where the end is going to be, where do you usually start, and what does that process look like?
For personal stuff, I generally don't. I kind of forego the thumbnails and all the other exploratory stuff because it's in my head. So basically, personal stuff, like I'm just drawing from my imagination. I already have a pretty clear vision of what I want, what the end product is going to be, and so I'll just from that point, it's just like I just kind of get to. It's like being in a candy store. I just get, okay, do I get to do analog? Am I going to pull out my iPad? Am I going to do 3D? I mean, it's like I'm going to build a paper mache thing. I mean, who knows? I mean, for personal work, it's kind of anything goes. I don't really have a specific process. But then I also have just like winding down work, where basically I just want to. I'm not necessarily shutting my brain off, but I'm kind of doing some calisthenics for my imagination, and so it's usually kind of resorts to just. I love drawing with pen and marker because you have to live with your mistakes. That's something I've adapted to over a period of time. Pencil's fine, but there's a temptation to erase your mistakes. So when you use pen, it's cool because your line is stuck, and you have to implement that into the final work somehow. So I kind of, that's the designer in me. It's a problem I want to solve. But it's also it's basically just committing to a final idea, and so it's not floating around in my head for an indefinite period of time. So usually it's pen and marker for me. I'll just pull out my sketchbooks and just do a whole bunch of renderings, just of anything and everything. Obviously, based on the class that I'm teaching at Art Center, which is all about mechs and robots. I keep myself loose by drawing lots and lots of mechs and robots. Trying things out. So, because you can get rusty, especially if you're a student, and your focus has to be elsewhere. You don't get a lot of time to do a lot of big elaborate drawings, and so, if you go to my Instagram page, I basically have thumbnails and sketches. That's about it.
So I saw one of the questions that came up from Sydney was something I was going to ask as well in terms of, so how decentralized is the concept design work now? Because I know in a lot of cases with animation studios specifically, even with VFX studios, because of COVID, because of everything else, it was already graduating towards a more decentralized artists could be anywhere approach, given the advent of the internet and pipelines that are really flexible now. So how does that work with conceptual artwork? How much needs to be kind of in-house where you're at a location, and how much can be kind of from wherever?
I think right now. So I had my buddy Alex Jagger, who's a art director at ILM. Still, he's like one of the few that has actually been able to live outside of California. He actually lives over in Flower Mound, and so I was talking to him about that. And they're busy just doing pre-production work left and right. From his standpoint as an art director and concept designer, this has not really been a big shock to the system. For most concept artists, freelance artists everywhere, we were kind of trained for a pandemic, from the get-go. As far the only stipulation, if you're working at a company like ILM, for example, and you're working on Star Wars, for example, or any of the spin-off Disney Plus shows, they're obviously they can't have people there. They're not going to cloister everyone into the Presidio. Everyone is working remotely, but you're going to be under super stringent, NDAs, and they're going to keep very close track remotely of what you're drawing. Are you posting it online? It's like certain projects, they're going to want to keep under lock and key if they can't have you under a roof. Outside of a pandemic scenario. If you're working on a Star Wars movie, they're going to have you want to relocate, obviously to the home base, because it's basically more about oversight and communication. Because a lot of the artists that are working on The Mandalorian, for example, are like in Sweden and just various other countries around the world, different time zones. So you don't want to, when you're working on a project that needs quick turnaround, you want to have everyone in a pretty relative. Close proximity to each other because you want to have immediate feedback. That's kind of the biggest hook. But working remotely is not really a big issue because they have a render farm that can run the entire United States, and so they just have to upload their stuff.
Can it run the Texas power grid?
It probably could easily. Yeah, one server could.
Yeah. Hey, so
Uh,
so Lauren,
yeah.
when you're in a studio, uh, is an art director looking at your process, or are they really just looking at your final result?
They want to see the results.
Yeah.
Um, that used to be kind of a point of contention. I think it would, because I'd never experienced it in game studios or working on film production, pre-production stuff. Is the art director does not care about what you're using, doesn't care about the tools you're using, doesn't care about what software you're using. They just want to see the results. Are you helping advance the story? Are you helping develop the story? Through your particular means. That's all they care about.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, they're going to show the production designer. The production designer is going to show the filmmaker, and the filmmaker is going to go, "Cool," and that's literally a percent of it.
Or not cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, or not cool. Yeah, and you'll get a stamp, a big X stamp or something. But it's like, yeah, it doesn't go. It's really not that elaborate. There's lots of fun stories about what Hollywood art departments are like, and it's like, yeah, 90% of it's not true. It's like it's usually somebody running past the wall, going neat, and then they're off.
Neat.
You spent 3 weeks on this illustration, and it's like cool, and so yeah, you have to kind of get used to that. Don't get bogged down with tools and process and stuff like that too much. You kind of develop your own rhythm. How do you work? How do you work as an artist, and then you adapt, because every art department is going to be different, based on the needs or based on the media that you're working in.
Yeah, I would think that it would be for students, the process is more important when you're applying, so that a potential employer can see it and can see what your process is, and they can make a judgment on you as an artist, whether they want to work with you or whether you understand what you're doing. And then once they hire you, then they just need you to make what they need you to make, right? I already know that you can do it. That's why I hired you. Now just go do what I need you to do.
Exactly. I mean, well, it's like, as Todd said, it's the seeing the process is the more interesting part, frankly. When I was helping hire people at Gearbox, I could care less about their final pristine ArtStation illustration. It's like I want to see their sketching.
Yeah.
Because if you can't sketch, you can't communicate. You can draw pretty pictures all day. You can have fun streaks and lines here and there and lens flares, but at the end of the day, if you can't visually communicate an idea, that's going to be an issue. So yeah. So absolutely process. Especially when you're getting ready to graduate. Keep it's like a Photoshop file. Keep everything separate. Have lots of layers. Have a sketchbook just full of just your thoughts, of your scribbles, of your ideas. That's good for you to see, because it's showing you that this is not a simple stupid sketch that you're doing. Everything you're doing is kind of like a prize, and so you're putting a lot of work and effort into that, and that's the value of seeing a process of sketches and ideas and thumbnails and whatever, of studies.
So I think I'm sure some of the viewers have a question about this, but maybe are afraid to ask. So we like to keep it real here, Lorin, in terms of this is a reality check in some ways too, because we get a lot of students, and I know a lot of individuals who think there's always this divide, and it's the same with animation that Sean and I, have worked in and kind of know more about in terms of like the industry and whatnot, where there's sometimes we call them fanimators, who are fans of animation, but watching animation and making and going through the process of animation is very different. And it's the same with drawing, and it's the same with conceptual artwork. And the reality is that while it may be exciting and flashy and kind of something that everyone wants to jump into, there are very few select people working in entertainment. It tends to be kind of the same usual suspects popping up here and there. But just in terms of not percentages, but it's difficult, right, to break into this. And it all comes down to the work that you're going to be doing up front. How much are you going to draw? How much do you want it? You can't just think that would be kind of fun. That would be kind of interesting. You have to live and breathe this stuff in terms of starting off, and not be afraid to spend days and days and days trying to draw straight lines if you're starting off, or spend days and days and days drawing cubes and primitives and perspective, because you got to, it's the what I think a lot of people struggle with, and I struggled with this initially, was every day is not going to be some huge gain. You're not going to be making these amazing things up front. It's very minimal. It's small little baby steps. And I think a lot of people either get bored and quit, or they get frustrated and quit. But what do you think about that process? Like, realistically, if someone was going to say, I would love to be a concept artist, what are they really looking at in terms of time, in terms of seasoning, in terms of, hey, I'm going to graduate, but what happens between, are they going to get something right after graduation? Is it going to take years of doing something else? Like, what do you see?
Well, first and foremost, now I would say, have you put in your 10,000 hours? As an abstract. I'd put that out there as an abstract because, when you're good at something, you're going to do it all the time. When you're passionate about something, you're going to do it all the time. It doesn't matter if you're bored. You're just going to keep pushing through it. You're going to it's part of who you are. It's not something that you just do for a paycheck, 9 to 5. So, you have to be practical. I mean, that's going to be part of it. But, at the end of the day, what I learned, when I was going on recruiting trips, actually with my dad, he was going to look for students at Art Center in Pasadena. When I was really little, I would take trips out there with him, and I would, Hollywood was a big thing to me back then, and so every chance to go out there was cool. We'd go to restaurants, and there was one particular restaurant, wonderful Italian place across from Universal Studios, and I remember going in there because all the waiters are opera singers, and so they sing, while they're serving your meal, and I walked in there, and I saw at the bar there was a guy, with his absolutely gorgeous wife or girlfriend, I don't know what, but anyway, he was totally ignoring her because he had a sketchbook in front of him. I probably know who it is now, at this point. But I just remember being, awestruck by that. He had this little tiny sketchbook, and he was doing this really elaborate spaceship, at the bar while they were waiting to be seated. And so that the image stuck with me, for a long time, because I've drawn my entire life. Like I've sacrificed a lot because I lived in my own head for so long. But seeing that guy on a professional level, ignoring the person that he was with in favor of drawing, I'm not advocating that, but I'm saying that level of passion, that's the requirement to being a successful conceptual artist, because as I said in the very beginning, you're competing also against a minimum of 1 million other people around the world who are equally or more competent than you are as a concept artist. There's only one way, and you have every right to be there, but the problem is, how much time are you going to put into it? So is it a passion, or is it a 9 to 5 job? So if it's a passion, you're gonna take every shortcut. You're gonna look for every opportunity to learn something new and a new method to do it, and you're gonna do it all the time. That's what separates the successful artists from the guys who do toothpaste commercials.
And I think we deal with this, Sean, a lot with animation too. Is that you can go online and see amazing stuff, right? And it's the most intimidating thing when you're starting off in something, to see all this amazing artwork out there in this case. And then you go back to your stuff, and here I am at the very beginning of my journey doing these little tiny things, and you just feel completely overwhelmed by it. So I think it's also a mixture of, you have to look and see what other people are doing, but you have to recognize that most of those people have been doing this for like 20 years that you're seeing that's out there. So you have to look at it, get inspired, and then put it away and go back to just your stuff and focus on kind of like, okay, and then go back. Because if you're always comparing like one-to-one to somebody else, I think it can get really overwhelming. And we see that with some of our students where they're just like, how am I ever going to get to the point where I'm like, well, you will, just you have to keep yourself motivated. And that's where I think talking to people is good, simply because if you're drawing all the time and not talking to people and ignoring them, then it's like you're going to get super frustrated. I'm just joking. I know what you meant.
No, that's a really tough thing to balance, which is looking at some of professionals' work and not like just getting crushed. Like, I'll never be able to do that. Versus looking at that and saying that's where I want to be. Basically, the idea of comparing yourself, you want to be aware of what the bar is, and then be able to put that away and say, okay, in order to do that, I need to focus on these small things rather than either being crushed and not wanting to do it anymore, or just trying to immediately mimic that without doing your fundamentals first. I think
Right.
those are the issues. It's really important. I do think it's really important to understand where the bar is and where you need to go.
Well,
Go ahead.
Well,
no,
what
no,
do you do? Yeah, do you have a vision? Do you have an end goal that you see that you want to be?
Yes.
And part of that is like finding somebody that you admire, an artist that you like, and say, okay, that's where I'm going to be, and then you start working on that. And instead of being intimidated, you turn the intimidation into excitement.
well, and
or,
that's where
or
like
motivation. Turn it into
yeah,
motivation.
exactly.
Yeah.
And somebody, I think it was Israel in the chat, said something about anime, and Sean made a joke because we're always talking about don't just draw anime all the time. And I think it's important not to just draw the same things all the time. Even if you're working on a fundamental skill, pick different subject matter, pick slightly different styles. And style is basically an approach that gets laid over the top of your fundamentals. But in the case of like anime, just because it came up, we see a lot of people drawing anime, and anime is already somebody's interpretation of real anatomy, right? So you're mimicking and you're copying their interpretation. So you're basically copying a copy, and you're getting really good at copying that copy, and that's okay. But can you go back to what it was and do something different with it, or do you know what those proportions are that aren't just being skewed and aren't just being? So I think it's important to have a variation too. And when you do get stuck and you do get frustrated, don't keep doing the same things over and over. Maybe take a break from a certain subject matter and do something different with it, just to keep it kind of fresh and keep it feel like you're making progress and moving forward without getting stuck.
Yeah, I did that. Fairly recently, where I basically I was in that exact same situation where I was like, okay, I'm spinning my wheels. Like this drawing looks exactly the same as that drawing I did 2 years ago, like verbatim. So I went, okay, I'm going to do something different, and I like totally immersed myself in surrealism. Namely David Lynch for anyone who's interested. And but what's interesting about him is he's a fine artist. He's a surrealist painter, so he does actual physical painting, physical work. And I listened to an interview where he said that the reason he got into film is he wanted to basically take a different medium and basically utilize the same technique that he used making collages with paints and cutouts and whatever he was using. And then you go and you look at his work, and yeah, his work when he starts going into his very Lynchian bizarreness, it looks like a fine art painting because he doesn't make an effort to make it look realistic or blend in perfectly. It actually looks like layered junk on top of itself. And so I did that for fun, and I took my fascination, interest with robots, and I started doing these surrealist illustrations of robots, and that was cool because then that shook me, that kind of broke me free from my very kind of stringent logical method of designing my process, where everything has to have a purpose and a reason. And I just went, screw it, and I focused more on interesting textures and shapes and curves and whatever, and that actually kind of opened up my brain a little bit more, to try out a different way of looking at things.
Yeah, I think that. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, no, I'm done.
I was just going to say, I think that's really great advice because I thought you were going to say something along the lines of, I was creating the same kind of art, so I just looked at something different, and I was going to be like, well, what did you do that was different? That's the question that I think a lot of these students would ask, right? Well, what specifically? And I think when you look at something that's so different from what you do, see what the kind of aspects of that art are and what the how they're doing that, and then try to apply it back to yours so that it changes things. That's great advice.
Well, as far just to dovetail on the end of that, I mean, as far as the David Lynch thing goes, because I've always had a fascination with dreams and kind of the subconscious imagery. Sorry if this goes off too philosophically, but he does the best version. He's the best visual artist that knows how to encapsulate something that cannot be literally visualized because it's unconscious.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the freeing element for me because it literally removed all logic from my brain and literally just kind of let me be absolutely kind of completely expressive. And that turned out to be kind of a fun thing to try out. And so yeah, that would definitely be a thing. So if you get an artist block, do something that is like well out of your comfort zone, or something that that is absolutely foreign to you. And give that a shot. Just like fully immerse yourself in that for just a little bit and see what that does. Because then you can always bring back what you're good at. But it's going to be tinged a little bit differently because you have this other influence.
Yeah. I think we'll do one last question.
Saw Sydney had a question.
Yeah, Sydney had a question up there that was, when you were at Gearbox and looking at portfolios, what did they generally consist of, when the ones that were the strongest? And then are there any that you remember in particular?
I can tell you the stuff that was not the strongest, that did not lead to them getting hired.
Tell us.
And it was usually I was usually kind of the dissenting voice, because I didn't come from a thorough game background. Gearbox was like actually my first real game industry job, and so I had I was coming in at it with a different perspective. The problem, and this is a problem with a lot of game studios, or actually any studio for that matter, but the game studios, Gearbox in particular, what they did, what a lot of the artists did, I would say the artists, the art department guys there, is they were focused on only the video games. And so they would look for people that created video game material that looked like a video game. And I'm thinking, that's awful, because now you're just kind of getting this weird pool of feedback loop. The images are getting more and more boring. There's nothing interesting about it. And so I would throw out, like, first of all, when you're creating, like, this is what I tell the portfolio, the applicants, is like, when you're coming up with something, do not reference anything else in your industry. Try something different. You want to take a fresh approach to this whole thing. Look at other games, but don't make a carbon copy of it. If you're coming in for a level design, application, I don't want to see a carbon copy of a level design that's been done 500 times already before. That's been on the market, for 10 years already.
Sure.
It's like, I've seen that. It's boring. It's not interesting.
The other thing.
Yeah,
sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting. What I would say is, if you're just sitting there copying art that's already been created, why should I hire you? I already have somebody who can do that clearly.
Exactly.
So you want to be bringing something new, a unique voice, a unique something that makes you valuable to a company or to an art director or to whomever. You want to be able to give that to the company or to the game or to the movie or whatever it is. Don't just copy.
Exactly. Well, and I think, like Lorin, like you were saying before too, if you can do just what Sean said, but still give it a flavor of something relative to that studio where it's different, but it still fits the vibe of everything, that's kind of that perfect mix of different yet similar that they gravitate towards, or that may be appealing to them.
Yeah. So to that point, the successful one, he was also one of the artists that I brought in for an application, because he was unemployed in LA and he's looking for work. And his name is you guys should go look him up. His name is Robert Chew, Chew. He came in, and he has this really impressive portfolio piece. It's a series that he's kind of continuing, and it's called The Big Five. And when I was still out there, he was running it past the Transformers producer. Like, he actually went out and met with an agency, and they were prepping it to be turned into a franchise. But it's basically about these giant robotic animals that embed themselves with animals in Africa, and basically it's kind of an anti-poaching type of scenario. So these huge, like, automaton, very robotic-looking animals, that look like an elephant or look like a zebra or whatever, and they work in tandem with these anti-poaching, military guys. That was cool in itself because it was unique. But the coolest part was when he told us how he came up with that idea. And he said, just for fun, he and his dad took a trip to the Serengeti and actually went out on safari and actually had these long, in-depth conversations, with these anti-poaching organizations over in Africa. And they kind of told them, actual stories about what happens and how they're trying to fight poaching and blah, blah, blah. So he had this crazy backstory of research, of actual research that he actually went out and did. And then he went, okay, that's kind of a cool idea. And then he turned that into, a portfolio piece, which is now kind of like branching off into all sorts of other fun things. But that was the thing that I brought, to Gearbox and said, check this out. And they went, holy crap, this is amazing. And so, because he came up with a really unique, so he kind of became the go-to character, environment guy, robot guy, after I left. But his work, just simply because, by the nature of the subject matter that he was doing, blended in perfectly, with what they were looking for with Borderlands 3, which was kind of changing the tone of the game, and so he kind of became the go-to guy for that. And so, so they were more than pleased to hire him, based on that. But yeah, it was this really, really interesting, really unique storyline that was also very applicable to a game, that he put into his portfolio that happened to be kind of like the winning piece that got him on board.
Yep, that's cool.
Yeah, that's great. So what do you think, Todd? You think we're
Yeah, I mean,
up?
I think we've pretty much gone through everything.
Hey, let me answer. I was typing to Jean there in the chat because
Sure.
she asked. So copy expressions, poses, use them as references to practice your own thing. So Jean, basically what I was talking about is, let's say you're really into vehicles, but you're just learning fundamentals. If you want to find an artist that really inspires you, and you want to copy that work, go for it. Use it as a learning process to see how, if you can take from them how they approach something. I think that's valid, and it's something that you should do. For instance, I don't have the book in front of me, but I've got these printouts here.
It's holding up his computer.
Yes, sorry. I don't have a camera either. It's on delay. 1 second. There. This is a drawing by a guy named, his last name is Vanderpool. I study anatomy through that because it was just mileage using my pencil to practice. And part of it is I know he's really good. I know he's a master, and I want to copy and do the types of things that he did. That is something that let's say I wanted to become a professional artist. I'm not trying to do that. I just do it for myself. I would never use that as something in a portfolio that I would ever show to someone else. It's just a learning tool for me. So that's really what I was talking about with copying. I think it's something really useful when you're starting out. Eventually, you need to get beyond that. You'll leave that behind.
Right.
What was the book that I had? I think it's called Human Anatomy. I don't know where it is. I got it somewhere. I think it's just called Human Anatomy by John Vanderpool.
Yeah,
Something
John
like that.
Anatomy.
Yeah, John Anatomy. I'll type his last name, Vanderpool. So that's his last name. You can look it up by that. Anyways, that's all I meant by copying. Again, I think it can be a really useful tool when you're learning. Eventually, you move beyond that, and you're going to be, you'll be good enough that you can just knock stuff out on your own. You don't need to. Need to copy other artists. Okay, so I think that's probably going to be it for today. So, to wrap up, here's what I'll say. Thank you for coming and participating in the chat. It was great. Loved having you. Would love for you guys to come back again. We would also love feedback as to what do you like? What do you want to see? That'll help Todd and I as we go forward, so that we're putting out interesting topics for you guys. And what I would really, really like to do is thank Lorin for stopping by.
Thank you, Lorin.
Super.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was awesome. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, super awesome.
Yeah, and I think everybody here was enjoying it as well. There you go.
They can feel free to reach out, through my email. Just email me and ask a question if you have any questions.
Well, what is your email? You got to be careful with that, Lorin. This is going to be seen. This is going to be seen by at least 10 people.
We have tens of people, Lorin.
Yes,
tens of subscribers.
Oh, gosh. Okay. Well, just go to my website.
There you go. Or check them out on Instagram.
Or Instagram, yeah.
Yeah, all that's good. So, Escape Pod, we normally live stream every Tuesday at 10 a.m. So feel free to come back. So we'll be streaming tomorrow morning. So would love to have you there. We also are putting out regular video content right now on Fridays. So if you want to see that, normally some process drawings. Would love
Working on
for
our
you to,
new series.
yeah. So we would love for you to take a look at that. So if you like what we're doing, subscribe, like. Hit the notification button. You can do that, so when we put out a video, you'll know about it. Otherwise, oh, Gene is asking, what is your Instagram? You can find them if you just type in Lorin Wood, but what is specifically?
I'm like the first 5 pages of a Google search. So
Look at you, Lorin.
He owns
I've
Google.
done my due diligence of self promotion. So
How much
You
did that
should.
cost?
it cost 10 years.
Lauren's got a lot of books too, so and they're definitely worth it. So, okay, I think that's it.
Okay.
Thanks so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Really appreciate it, and hopefully we see you again on another stream. All right.
Okay.
See ya.
So long.
All right.